The bullet shattered her rear window first, then her faith in everything she'd been taught about playing by the rules. But when Amara Williams raised her licensed firearm and fired back, she had no idea she was about to change 2 lives forever. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The coffee was still warm in Amara Williams' cup holder when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Tuesday morning, 8:47 a.m., Maple Street. She knew because she always checked her dashboard clock when pulled over, a habit her father had drilled into her since she got her license. Document everything, he'd said. Remember everything. She pulled her pristine white Honda Accord to the curb, hands already positioned at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Her heart rate barely elevated. This was routine. Amara Williams, 32, civil rights attorney, had been pulled over exactly 7 times in her driving career. Each time she'd been respectful, compliant, and sent on her way with either a warning or a minor citation. The system worked when you worked with it, she believed. Her law degree from Georgetown hung in her downtown office for a reason. "License and registration, please," came the gruff voice at her window. Officer Bradley Morrison, badge 4792, according to his nameplate. White, mid-40s, with tired eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Of course, officer." Amara reached slowly into her purse, movements deliberate and visible. She'd done this dance before. "May I ask what I was pulled over for?" Morrison's partner appeared at the passenger window, Officer Rick Donovan, younger, with the kind of swagger that made Amara's chest tighten slightly. She'd seen that look in courtrooms, the one that said she didn't belong. "Speeding," Morrison said flatly, though Amara knew she'd been going exactly 28 in the 30-mile-per-hour zone. She always drove 2 under. "I have my speed documented on my dashboard camera," she said politely, handing over her documents. "Would you like to review—" "Smart mouth," Donovan muttered from the passenger side, loud enough for her to hear. Amara felt the familiar chill, the one that came when she realized this wasn't routine. Not today, not with these two. 15 blocks away, Detective James Rivera was reviewing case files when his radio crackled to life. Morning shift, desk duty, punishment for filing 1 too many complaints about his colleagues' methods. James had been LAPD for 8 years, worked his way up from patrol to detective, but lately felt like he was swimming upstream in muddy water. "Unit 47 requesting backup on Maple Street," came Morrison's voice. "Suspicious activity during traffic stop." James frowned. Morrison and Donovan again. Those two had been flagged in his reports more than once. Excessive force complaints, racial bias incidents that somehow got buried in paperwork. His captain kept telling him to focus on his own cases, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, like pressure in a pot with no release valve. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister Maria. "Mijo, remember what Papa used to say? Sometimes you have to choose between being comfortable and being right. Love you." James stared at the message. His father had been a cop too, back in El Paso. Dirty cops, he'd always said, were like cancer. Ignore them, and they spread. The radio crackled again. "All units, we have shots fired on Maple Street. Officer involved, shooting in progress." James was moving before he finished processing the words, grabbing his jacket and keys. Maple Street was his district. Whatever was happening, he was about to be neck deep in it. Back on Maple Street, Amara's world was shifting in slow motion. Morrison had returned to his patrol car with her license, taking longer than necessary. Donovan remained at her passenger window, studying her interior with obvious suspicion. "Nice car," Donovan said, his tone suggesting otherwise. "Civil rights lawyer, huh? Bet you make good money suing cops?" "I represent clients who've been denied their constitutional rights," Amara replied carefully. "It's important work." "Constitutional rights," Morrison said, returning to her window. He held her license but didn't hand it back. "You know what's interesting about your record, Ms. Williams?" Amara waited. Her record was spotless, No tickets, no arrests, not even an unpaid parking violation. Says here you were involved in the Johnson case last year, the one where that scumbag drug dealer claimed we planted evidence? Her stomach dropped. The Johnson case had been her biggest victory. A young father wrongfully arrested, evidence proving police misconduct. The case had made headlines, and apparently some cops had long memories. Mr. Johnson was innocent. The court agreed. Court got it wrong, Donovan said, his hand resting on his weapon. Way I see it, lawyers like you are the real criminals, making it harder for good cops to do their jobs. The morning air suddenly felt thick, charged with the kind of electricity that comes before lightning strikes. Amara's father's voice echoed in her mind. Document everything, remember everything, and baby girl, survive everything. What would you do if you realized a routine traffic stop was becoming something much more dangerous? Share your thoughts in the comments below. She reached slowly for her phone to start recording, and that's when everything exploded. The first gunshot came without warning. Amara had been reaching for her phone, slowly, deliberately, the way her father taught her, when Morrison's hands slammed against her roof. Gun! She's got a gun! But she didn't. Her phone clattered to the floorboard as the world tilted sideways. Through her passenger window, she saw Donovan's service weapon drawn, pointed directly at her chest. I don't have a gun! The words tore from her throat, raw and desperate. My hands are visible. I'm reaching for my phone. Time fractured. Morrison was shouting something about officer safety. Donovan's finger hovered over the trigger, his face twisted with an ugly certainty that made her blood freeze. This wasn't procedure. This wasn't protocol. This was execution. Please, she whispered and hated herself for begging. Please, I haven't done anything wrong. Shut up, Morrison barked. Exit the vehicle slowly, hands where we can see them. Amara's legal training kicked in even as terror flooded her system. They were creating a record, establishing their narrative. Traffic stop, suspicious behavior, feared for their safety. The same story that had been told 1,000 times before. She opened her door with trembling fingers, each movement calculated to show compliance. Her purse remained on the passenger seat. Her phone was still on the floor. Both hands were empty, visible, non-threatening. It didn't matter. The second gunshot exploded through the morning air, just as she stepped onto the asphalt. The bullet punched through her rear window, safety glass cascading like deadly rain. She heard her own scream as if it came from someone else. High, sharp, the sound of a life realizing it was about to end. She's reaching, Donovan shouted, though her hands were raised above her head. The third shot went wide, sparking off the concrete near her feet. Amara's mind went crystal clear in that moment. The kind of clarity that comes when survival instinct overrides everything else. They were going to kill her, right here on Maple Street in broad daylight, and they were going to say she threatened them. Her father's voice cut through the chaos. Baby girl, I got you something for your glove compartment. Just in case. Promise me you'll never be a victim. The licensed Glock 19 her father had insisted she carry. The one she'd never wanted, never expected to need. The one that was supposed to make him feel better about her living alone in the city. Morrison fired again. The bullet whined past her ear close enough that she felt the heat of it, close enough to know the next one wouldn't miss. Amara dove toward her car, adrenaline turning her limbs to liquid fire. Her hand found the glove compartment as another shot shattered her side mirror. Glass cut her cheek, the pain sharp and immediate and real. They were really doing this. 2 police officers were trying to murder her in cold blood. The Glock felt impossibly heavy in her shaking hands. She'd been to the range exactly 4 times in 2 years, enough to satisfy her father, not enough to feel confident. But as Morrison advanced on her position, weapon drawn, his face a mask of cold determination, confidence became irrelevant. Drop the weapon, she screamed, her voice cracking. I am a licensed concealed carry holder. Drop your weapons. Morrison laughed, actually laughed. You think anyone's going to believe you, sweetheart? 2 officers versus 1 uppity lawyer with a gun. Guess who wins that story? That was when Amara understood with perfect, terrible clarity that this had never been about a traffic stop. This was about teaching her a lesson, about putting her in her place, about making sure she understood that her education, her success, her belief in justice meant nothing when it came down to her word against theirs. Donovan flanked left, trying to get a clean shot. Morrison pressed forward from the right. They moved with practiced coordination. This wasn't their first time. The realization hit her like a physical blow. How many others? How many other traffic stops had ended this way? How many families had been told their loved ones were reaching for a weapon or acting aggressively? "Last chance," Morrison called out. "Drop it or we drop you." Amara's hand steadied. The Glock's grip felt solid now, familiar in a way that surprised her. All those range sessions with her father, his patient voice in her ear. "Breathe, baby girl. Center yourself. Aim for center mass. And remember, you have every right to defend your life." "No," she said, her voice carrying across the morning air with unexpected strength. "You drop yours. I know what you're doing. I know what this is." Morrison's expression shifted from amusement to rage. "You think you're special? You think that law degree makes you bulletproof?" He raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. Amara fired first. The sound was enormous, final, a punctuation mark that ended one version of her life and began another. Morrison spun sideways, clutching his shoulder, his weapon clattering across the asphalt. "Officer down! Officer down!" Donovan screamed into his radio, but his voice carried something else now. Uncertainty, fear. The predator had become prey, and he didn't know how to process the reversal. "Drop it," Amara commanded, swinging her weapon toward him. "Drop it now." But Donovan was raising his gun again, his face twisted with fury and disbelief. A black woman had shot a police officer. In his world, that couldn't stand. That couldn't be allowed to end any way but her death. The morning sun caught the barrel of his service weapon as he took aim. Amara saw her reflection in his eyes. Not a person, not a lawyer, not a daughter or a woman with dreams and fears, and a life worth living. Just a target. She fired again. In a life or death moment, what would drive your decisions? Fear, training, or something deeper? Let us know what you think in the comments. The silence after gunfire was deafening. Amara stood in the middle of Maple Street, her father's Glock still raised, her hands no longer shaking. Morrison writhed on the asphalt, clutching his wounded shoulder, his blood dark against the morning concrete. Donovan lay motionless, 10 feet away, her second shot having found its mark in his chest. She was alive. They were down. And in about 30 seconds, every cop in the city would be screaming toward this intersection with one goal: to kill the black woman who had dared to shoot back. "This isn't happening," she whispered to herself, the words a desperate mantra. "This can't be happening." But the metallic taste of gunpowder in the air said otherwise. The sirens already wailing in the distance said otherwise. Morrison's groans of pain and fury said otherwise. "You crazy, but Morrison gasped, struggling to reach his radio with his good arm. "You just killed yourself. You hear me? You just signed your own death warrant." Amara kept the gun trained on him, her legal mind racing through scenarios, even as shock threatened to shut her down completely. Self-defense. Clear case of self-defense. They fired first. Multiple witnesses would have heard the shots. Her dashboard camera had recorded everything. Except Morrison was right about one thing. Who would believe her? Her phone. She needed her phone. With trembling fingers, she reached into the car and grabbed it from the floorboard, never taking her eyes off Morrison. The screen was cracked but functional. She hit record and aimed it at the wounded officer. "State your name and badge number," she commanded, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Go to hell." "You fired first, multiple shots, at an unarmed woman during a traffic stop. Say it." Morrison's laugh was wet, pained. "Unarmed? You shot 2 police officers, you psycho. Self-defense, my ass." The sirens were getting closer. Amara's window of opportunity was shrinking by the second. Once backup arrived, her version of events would disappear into the blue wall of silence. She'd become another armed suspect, another justified shooting, another hashtag that would trend for a week before being forgotten. "I know who you are," she said, kneeling just out of Morrison's reach. "I know about the Johnson case. I know you planted that evidence. I know this was payback. Something flickered in Morrison's eyes, fear mixing with his rage. You don't know, and it won't matter anyway. You're a dead woman walking. 3 blocks away, Detective James Rivera was the first responder on scene. His unmarked car rounded the corner onto Maple Street, and what he saw made his blood freeze. A black woman in business attire stood over 2 downed officers, a smoking gun in her hand. Everything about the scene screamed exactly what he'd feared would happen someday. Morrison and Donovan's recklessness had finally exploded into something that couldn't be covered up. But as James took in the details, bullet holes in the woman's car, shattered glass everywhere, her defensive position rather than aggressive, a different story began to emerge. He parked 20 feet away and stepped out slowly, his own weapon drawn but lowered. "Ma'am, I'm Detective Rivera. I need you to set down your weapon." Amara turned toward him, and James saw something in her eyes that stopped him cold. Not madness, not rage, terror. Pure, crystalline terror of a woman who knew she was about to die. "They tried to kill me," she said, her voice breaking. "I was recording a traffic stop, and they tried to kill me." "I know," James said quietly and meant it. "I believe you, but right now, I need you to put the gun down so we can figure this out." "You believe me?" The hope in her voice was heartbreaking. "Officer Morrison, what's your status?" James called out, keeping his weapon lowered. "Rivera, thank God." Morrison struggled to sit up. "This crazy butch on us opened fire on us during a routine stop. Donovan's hit bad. We need EMTs now." James looked at the bullet holes in the woman's car, then at Morrison's position relative to her vehicle. The trajectory was all wrong for Morrison's story. The woman would have had to fire from inside her car to create those impact patterns. But she was standing outside, had obviously exited her vehicle before the shooting started. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Amara Williams. I'm an attorney. I represent—" "The Johnson case," James finished. Morrison's expression shifted, confirming what James had suspected. More sirens filled the air. In 60 seconds, this street would be crawling with cops, and Amara Williams would become a statistic. James made a decision that would change his life forever. "Ms. Williams, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Put your weapon on the ground, step back, and put your hands behind your head. Do exactly what I say when I say it, and don't resist anything that happens next. Do you understand?" "They're going to kill me." "Not if I can help it." James stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I've been building a case against these 2 for months. Your dashboard camera, is it still recording?" "Yes." "Good. That footage is going to save your life. But first, we have to make sure you survive the next 10 minutes. The first patrol car screamed around the corner, followed by 2 more. James could see the officers inside already reaching for their weapons, their faces set in the familiar mask of us versus them that had poisoned too many scenes like this. "Down! Now!" James barked at Amara, his voice carrying the authority of 8 years on the force. Amara dropped to her knees, placing her weapon on the asphalt and interlacing her fingers behind her head. As the patrol cars surrounded them, James positioned himself between her and the arriving officers. "Scene is secure," he shouted. "Suspect is in custody. Hold your fire." But even as he said the words, James could see the anger in his colleagues' faces. One of their own was down. The shooter was black. In their minds, justice was simple and immediate. "She shot cops, Rivera," Officer Martinez called out, his weapon trained on Amara's back. "Step aside." "I said the scene is secure." "Rivera." Morrison's voice was weak but venomous. "Don't do anything stupid. You know how this goes." James looked down at Amara, kneeling on the blood-stained asphalt, her business suit torn and dirty, her whole body trembling with the knowledge that she'd crossed a line there was no coming back from. When the system is broken, who can you trust to do the right thing? Share your thoughts on courage in impossible situations. Yes, James knew exactly how this went. He'd seen it before, participated in it before, stayed quiet before. Not today. The Central City Police Station's interview room smelled like stale coffee in desperation. Amara sat handcuffed to a metal table, her business suit wrinkled and stained with glass fragments, her right cheek bandaged where Morrison's bullet had drawn blood. 6 hours had passed since Maple Street, and she hadn't spoken to anyone except to request a lawyer, a request that had been processed, but somehow never fulfilled. The door opened, and Detective Rivera entered alone, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a thick manila folder. He looked different than he had at the scene, younger somehow, despite the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "Ms. Williams." He set 1 cup in front of her, though she couldn't reach it with her hands cuffed. "I'm Detective James Rivera. We met this morning. You're the one who kept them from shooting me." Her voice was hoarse from hours of silence. "I'm the one who's trying to keep you alive long enough for the truth to come out." James sat across from her, studying her face. "How are you holding up?" Amara laughed, a sound that bordered on hysteria. "I shot 2 police officers this morning. How do you think I'm holding up?" "I think you defended yourself against 2 corrupt cops who were trying to execute you." James opened the folder, revealing photos of the crime scene. "Your dashboard camera footage confirms it. Morrison fired first. 3 shots before you even touched your weapon." Hope flickered in Amara's chest, dangerous and fragile. "Then why am I still here? Why haven't you released me?" James was quiet for a long moment, and that silence told her everything she needed to know. "Because Captain Morrison, Officer Morrison's brother, is running this investigation. Because the DA's office is already talking about charging you with attempted murder of a police officer. Because your footage mysteriously corrupted during evidence processing." The hope died. "Of course it did. But I made a copy first." James slid a flash drive across the table. "Violated about 15 protocols doing it, but it's clean footage of the entire incident. Your father was smart having you install that system." Tears she'd been holding back for hours finally spilled over. "My father? Does he know?" "He's been calling every hour. Your mother too. I've been stalling them, telling them you're in protective custody." James leaned forward. "Which is partially true. Half the department wants you dead for shooting cops. The other half wants you dead for exposing cops. Right now, this room is the safest place for you in the city. What about the other half that wants justice?" "You're looking at him." James's voice was quiet, certain. "And maybe 3 others I can trust completely. Not great odds." The door burst open without warning. Captain Morrison strode in, an older, heavier version of the officer Amara had shot, with the same cold eyes and cruel mouth. Behind him came Lieutenant Shaw, a thin man with nervous energy and sweat stains under his arms. "Rivera, what the hell are you doing?" Morrison's voice carried the authority of 25 years on the force. "You're not assigned to this case." "Someone needs to take her statement," James replied evenly. "Standard procedure. Standard procedure is for her to rot in a cell until we decide how to charge her." Morrison turned to Amara, his hatred barely contained. "You shot my brother, you piece of garbage. Bradley's in surgery right now because of you." "Your brother tried to murder me," Amara said, finding strength she didn't know she still possessed. "And I have proof." Morrison laughed. "Proof? You mean that corrupted footage from your car? Real shame about that technical malfunction." James stood slowly. "Actually, Captain, the footage is perfectly clear. Would you like to review it?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Morrison's eyes locked onto James with laser intensity. "Rivera, I think you're confused about whose side you're on here. I'm on the side of the truth. The truth is that this woman opened fire on 2 police officers during a routine traffic stop. The truth is that she's a cop-hating lawyer who saw an opportunity to make a statement. The truth is that she's going down for attempted murder, and anyone who helps her is going down too." Lieutenant Shaw shifted nervously. "Captain, maybe we should review all the evidence before—" "Shut up, Shaw." Morrison never took his eyes off James. "Rivera, you've got 10 seconds to walk out of this room and forget you ever saw that footage. Your choice." The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Amara could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air. James Rivera, a man she'd known for 6 hours, was being asked to choose between his career and her life. "I can't do that, Captain." Morrison's smile was predatory. "Can't or won't?" "Both." Then you're suspended, effective immediately. Badge and gun now. James reached into his jacket and pulled out his badge, setting it on the table with deliberate care. His service weapon followed. Amara Williams is under my protection. That doesn't change just because you took my badge. Your protection? Morrison stepped closer. You're nobody now, Rivera. Just another civilian getting in the way of a police investigation. Then arrest me too. James moved to stand beside Amara's chair. Because I'm not leaving her alone with you. Shaw looked between the two men, sweat beading on his forehead. Captain, this is getting out of hand. Maybe you should shut your mouth and remember who signs your paychecks. Morrison pulled out his phone. I'm calling Internal Affairs. Rivera, you just ended your career for a cop killer. She's not a cop killer. She's a woman who refused to die quietly. Morrison dialed a number, spoke in low tones for 30 seconds, then hung up. IA's sending someone down. Shaw, you're babysitting these two until they arrive. Don't let them talk to anyone. Don't let them make any calls. Don't let them breathe without permission. He headed for the door, then turned back. Rivera, you could have been somebody. Now you're just another bleeding heart who threw away everything for a principle. His eyes shifted to Amara. And you, enjoy your last few hours of thinking you won something, because tomorrow you're going to learn what happens to people who declare war on the police. The door slammed behind him, leaving Amara, James, and the nervous Lieutenant Shaw in suffocating silence. This is insane, Shaw muttered, running his hands through his thinning hair. This whole thing is insane. James sat back down across from Amara. Shaw, how long until IA gets here? Hour, maybe two. Good, that gives us time. James looked at Amara, and she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Determination mixed with something deeper, more personal. Ms. Williams, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Are you ready to fight this thing all the way? Because once we walk out of this room together, there's no going back. They'll come after both of us with everything they have. Amara thought of her father's voice, her mother's prayers, the young clients she represented who believed the system could be changed. She thought of Morrison's cruel laugh and Donovan's finger on the trigger. Detective Rivera? James, if we're doing this, call me James. James. His name felt solid on her tongue. I've been fighting this system my whole career. Today was just the first time I had to use a gun to do it. Sometimes standing up for what's right means risking everything you've worked for. What would you be willing to sacrifice for justice? Share your thoughts below. Shaw looked between them and shook his head. You two are about to destroy your lives over principle? James reached across the table and, in a gesture that Shaw pretended not to see, uncuffed Amara's hands. Some principles are worth destroying your life for. For the first time since Maple Street, Amara smiled. The precinct's break room had become their temporary sanctuary. Shaw had nervously allowed them to move there, after James pointed out that Internal Affairs would want to interview them separately anyway. Two vending machines hummed in the corner, and fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in harsh, institutional white. Amara sat at a small table, finally free from handcuffs, cradling a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. James stood by the window, watching patrol cars come and go in the parking lot below. The silence between them had stretched for 20 minutes. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken questions. Why? Amara finally asked. James turned from the window. Why what? Why did you risk everything for me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. James was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a worn photograph, a young Latina woman in a graduation cap and gown, beaming at the camera. This is my sister Elena. Was my sister. Amara's heart clenched at the past tense. What happened to her? 3 years ago, she was driving home from her nursing school graduation, pulled over for suspicious activity in her own neighborhood. James's voice grew flat, controlled. 2 officers, Morrison and Donovan actually, they said she was acting erratically, reached for something in her car, shot her 17 times. The coffee cup slipped from Amara's hands, shattering on the linoleum floor. Oh God, James, I'm so sorry. She was reaching for her graduation certificate, wanted to show them she wasn't some gang member or drug dealer. She was a nurse, going to work at Children's Hospital. He stared at the photo. The investigation concluded it was a justified shooting. Elena was acting suspiciously and failed to comply with lawful orders. Case closed. But you were already on the force then. Yeah, detective for 2 years. I tried to investigate, tried to get someone to listen. My own department told me I was too close, too emotional, that I needed to accept that sometimes good people die in the line of duty. His laugh was bitter. The line of duty, like Elena was the one with the badge and gun. Amara knelt to pick up the broken ceramic pieces, her hands shaking. That's why you've been building a case against them. I've been documenting everything, every complaint, every incident report, every time they've escalated unnecessarily, but it's like trying to hold water in a basket. The system protects them, covers for them, promotes them. James sat down across from her. Until today. Today? Today, they finally picked the wrong target, a civil rights attorney with a dashboard camera and the training to fight back. Today, their luck ran out. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I could have been Elena. Yes, you could have been. And 6 months from now, some other woman could be you, if we don't stop this. James reached across the table and gently took her hand. That's why I can't walk away. Elena didn't get justice, but maybe you can. The touch of his hand was electric, unexpected. Amara looked up into his dark eyes and saw her own determination reflected back, but also something deeper, more personal. Tell me about your father, James said softly. The one who taught you to document everything. Amara's throat tightened. Marcus Williams, 30 years with the Chicago PD. He saw things, did things, that he regretted later. When he retired, he became obsessed with making sure I'd never be defenseless. She wiped her eyes with her free hand. He used to say that the system was like a broken bone that healed wrong. You could work around it, adapt to it, but someday it would break again in the same place. Smart man. He made me take self-defense classes, firearms training, legal advocacy courses, installed that camera system in my car himself. She laughed through her tears. I thought he was paranoid, told him we lived in different times, that things had changed. What would he say about today? He'd say he taught me well, and that I should trust you. Amara studied James's face. The strong jaw, the kind eyes, the way he held himself like a man carrying the weight of his convictions. He always said I'd know who the good ones were when I met them. The break room door opened, and Lieutenant Shaw peered in nervously. IA's here. They want to interview you separately, starting with Rivera. James squeezed Amara's hand before releasing it. Remember what I told you. Stick to the facts. Don't let them twist your words. James! She caught his arm as he stood. What happens if they don't believe us? What happens if the footage isn't enough? His expression hardened with resolve. Then we take it public. Media, federal investigation, whatever it takes. Morrison thinks he can bury this, but he's wrong. Too many people saw what happened. Too many witnesses. And us? What happens to us? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to fully explore. James leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her. I don't know, but I know I'm not walking away from you. Not after today, not after seeing who you really are when everything's on the line. Before Amara could respond, Shaw cleared his throat impatiently. Rivera, they're waiting. James straightened, transforming back into the professional detective, but his eyes stayed on Amara for one more moment. Whatever happens in there, remember, you're not alone anymore. As he walked toward the door, Amara called out, James? He turned back. Elena would be proud of you. For the first time since she'd met him, James Rivera smiled, not the careful, controlled expression of a cop, but the genuine warmth of a man who'd found something worth protecting again. After he left, Amara sat alone in the flickering fluorescent light, touching the place on her hand where his fingers had been. In the span of 8 hours, Her entire world had exploded and reformed around this stranger who'd chosen to stand beside her when everyone else wanted her dead. She thought about Elena, a young nurse who died for the crime of existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. She thought about her father, who'd spent his career watching the system break good people and then taught his daughter how to survive the breaking. Most of all, she thought about James Rivera, a man who'd thrown away his career for a woman he barely knew, because sometimes the right thing to do was also the only thing to do. Have you ever met someone who changed your perspective on what's possible in just a few hours? Sometimes the most important connections happen in the worst circumstances. What do you think draws people together in moments of crisis? Outside, storm clouds gathered over the city, and Amara wondered if they were heading into the darkness or finally beginning to see the light. The internal affairs interview had been a disaster. Detective Patricia Hayes from Iowa had spent 2 hours trying to twist every word Amara said, suggesting she'd planned the confrontation, that she'd been looking for an excuse to shoot police officers, that her radical legal work had motivated her to violence. By the time Hayes finished, Amara felt like she'd been put through a meat grinder. Now, at 11 p.m., she sat in the precinct's small chapel, a non-denominational room with plastic chairs and motivational posters about courage and service. The irony wasn't lost on her. James had texted her to meet him there after his own interview, saying it was the one place in the building without cameras. When the door opened, she looked up expecting to see James. Instead, Lieutenant Shaw entered, looking more nervous than ever. "Ms. Williams, there's been a development." Her heart stopped. What kind of development? "Officer Donovan died an hour ago. Surgery couldn't save him." Shaw's voice was barely above a whisper. "You're being charged with murder in the first degree. They're moving you to county lockup tonight." The room spun around her. Murder. She'd killed a police officer, even though he'd been trying to kill her, even though she'd had no choice. The law would see her as a cop killer. "Where's Detective Rivera?" Shaw wouldn't meet her eyes. "He's being processed. Accessory after the fact. Obstruction of justice. They're saying he tampered with evidence by copying your footage?" "No." The word came out as a broken whisper. "No, he was trying to help me. He was trying to do the right thing." "I know, but that doesn't matter now." Shaw glanced toward the door. "Listen, I shouldn't be telling you this, but they're not taking you to county tonight. Morrison's got something else planned. Something off the books." Terror flooded her system. "What do you mean?" "I mean, get out of here. Now, while I'm still the only one watching you." Before Amara could respond, the chapel door opened again. This time James appeared, but he looked different. His shirt was torn, his lip was split, and his right eye was swelling shut. "Jesus, what did they do to you?" Amara rushed to him. "Convinced me to see their perspective," James said dryly, wincing as she touched his bruised face. "Shaw, we need to go. Now." "Go where?" Shaw looked panicked. "You're both fugitives now. Every cop in the state will be looking for you." "Not every cop." James pulled out his phone and showed them a text message. "Safe house ready. Come alone. Trust no one else. M." "Who's M?" Amara asked. "My father's old partner, Martin Cross. He's been retired for 5 years, but he still has contacts. He's the one who helped me build the case against Morrison and Donovan." James looked at Shaw. "Can you give us 10 minutes before you report us missing?" Shaw ran his hands through his hair. "This is insane. You're asking me to help cop killers escape. We're asking you to help innocent people stay alive long enough for the truth to come out," Amara said quietly. "Lieutenant Shaw, what would you want someone to do if it was your daughter sitting here?" Shaw stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 10 minutes. That's all I can give you." 20 minutes later, they were in James's personal car, driving through the empty streets of the industrial district. The city looked different at night, harder, more dangerous, full of shadows where threats could hide. "This is completely insane," Amara said, breaking the silence. "This morning I was a respectable attorney with a clean record. Now I'm a fugitive wanted for murdering a police officer. This morning I was a detective with 8 years of clean service. Now I'm unemployed and facing felony charges." James glanced at her. Funny how fast your life can change. It's not funny at all. No, it's not. He reached over and took her hand. But you know what is funny. I don't regret it. Amara looked at their intertwined fingers. You don't regret throwing away your career for a stranger? You're not a stranger anymore. His voice was soft, certain. Somewhere between watching you refuse to back down from Morrison and seeing you cry over Elena's picture, you became something else. What did I become? James was quiet for several blocks. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the engine. You became someone worth saving, someone worth fighting for, someone worth... He trailed off. Worth what? Worth falling for. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Amara stared at his profile in the dashboard lights. This man who'd risked everything for her, who'd stood between her and certain death, who was now driving her toward an uncertain future. James, we barely know each other. I know you kept your composure when 2 cops tried to execute you. I know you cried for my dead sister like she was your own family. I know you chose to fight back instead of dying quietly. He pulled into an empty parking lot and stopped the car. I know that in 8 hours, you've shown me more courage and compassion than I've seen in 8 years on the force. Amara turned to face him fully. In the dim light, his bruised face looked like a warrior's, battered but unbroken, marked by his refusal to surrender his principles. This is impossible, she whispered. We're fugitives. We're facing murder charges. We don't have a future. Maybe not, but we have right now. James cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the bandage on her cheek where Morrison's bullet had grazed her. And right now, I can't imagine being anywhere else but here with you. When their lips met, it was with the desperate intensity of 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their old lives. The kiss tasted like coffee and adrenaline and the salt of unshed tears. It tasted like hope in the middle of hopelessness. When they broke apart, Amara rested her forehead against his. What are we doing? I don't know, but whatever it is, we're doing it together. Outside, the city slept, unaware that 2 of its most wanted fugitives had just discovered something worth living for in the front seat of a stolen moment. Martin's safe house is 15 minutes from here, James said quietly. Then we better go. But neither of them moved. Amara? Yeah. When this is over, when we clear our names and get justice for Elena and everyone else Morrison and Donovan hurt, I want to try this. You and me. For real. She kissed him again, softer this time, like a promise. When this is over, Detective Rivera, I'd like nothing more. Love has a way of finding us in the most unexpected moments. Have you ever experienced a connection that felt destined, even in impossible circumstances? Share your thoughts about love born from crisis. As they drove toward Martin Cross's safe house, both of them knew they were heading into the unknown. But for the first time since the morning's shooting, neither of them felt alone. Martin Cross's safe house was a modest ranch home in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business and porch lights stayed on all night. At 72, Martin still carried himself like the Marine he'd been before joining the force, but his eyes held the weariness of a man who'd seen too much corruption go unpunished. James and Amara had been there for 18 hours when everything fell apart. The footage is gone, Martin said, hanging up his phone. His weathered face looked older than his years in the kitchen's harsh fluorescent light. My contact at the FBI says the flash drive was corrupted during their evidence review. Complete digital destruction? Amara felt the world tilt sideways. That's impossible. James made a perfect copy. Perfect copies can be perfectly destroyed if you know the right people. Martin's voice was grim. Morrison's got contacts everywhere. FBI, DA's office, internal affairs. He's been building his network for 20 years. James slammed his fist on the kitchen table, making the coffee cups jump. What about witnesses? Someone had to see the shooting. 3 potential witnesses. Maria Santos saw the whole thing from her apartment window. She's been deported. Immigration raid this morning. Expired visa they've been ignoring for 2 years. Martin consulted his notes. Tommy Chen was walking his dog, saw Morrison fire first, He's in county lockup on a DUI that happened right after he talked to my contact. Third witness, Mrs. Patterson, suddenly can't remember anything. Seems her grandson's drug charges got dropped in exchange for her selective amnesia. Amara sank into her chair, the weight of hopelessness crushing down on her. They've eliminated every piece of evidence, every witness. It gets worse. Martin sat heavily across from them. DA's office is calling a press conference this afternoon. They're announcing murder charges against both of you. James, they're saying you were Amara's accomplice, that you helped plan the attack on Morrison and Donovan. Based on what evidence? Based on this. Martin slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were printouts of text messages, bank records, hotel receipts. James stared at the documents in disbelief. These are fabricated. I've never been to any of these places, never sent these messages. Doesn't matter. They look real. Morrison's people are thorough. Martin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face went pale. Jesus Christ. What now? News van just pulled up outside. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this place is swarming with cops. The sound of helicopter rotors began building in the distance. James grabbed Amara's hand, pulling her toward the back door. We have to go. Now. But as they reached the kitchen window, Martin grabbed James's arm. Son, there's something else. Something I should have told you earlier. What? Martin's eyes were full of pain and regret. The night Elena died, I was on duty. I was the supervising detective who signed off on Morrison's report. James froze. What are you talking about? I knew the shooting was wrong. I knew those bastards murdered your sister. But I was 2 years from retirement, and Morrison threatened to destroy my pension, my reputation, everything I'd worked for. Tears ran down the old man's weathered cheeks. I'm the reason Elena never got justice. I'm the coward who let her killers walk free. The betrayal hit James like a physical blow. Amara watched in horror as the man she'd fallen in love with, the man who'd sacrificed everything for truth and justice, realized that his father figure had been complicit in his sister's murder. You son of a bitch! James's voice was barely human. You let me think you were helping me build a case against them. You let me believe you cared about Elena. I do care, that's why I'm trying to help you now. 3 years too late. James lunged forward, grabbing Martin by the shirt. Elena was 22 years old. She was going to save children's lives, and you let her killers walk free because you were worried about your goddamn pension. James, stop! Amara tried to pull him back, but he shoved her away. Don't touch me. Don't you see what this means? He's been feeding information to Morrison this whole time. He probably told them where to find the witnesses, how to destroy the evidence. That's not true, Martin protested weakly. Isn't it? You've had 18 hours to sabotage everything. You probably called Morrison the minute we got here. The sound of sirens joined the helicopter noise outside. Through the front window, they could see police cars surrounding the house, officers taking position behind their vehicles with weapons drawn. I never betrayed you, Martin said desperately. I'm trying to make amends. By getting us killed. James's face was twisted with rage and heartbreak. Is that how you make amends for Elena? Amara felt her own trust shattering as the pieces fell into place. The convenient timing of the evidence destruction, the perfectly orchestrated elimination of witnesses, the way Martin had known exactly where to meet them, exactly how to gain their confidence. You played us, she said quietly. From the beginning, you played us. No, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Amara's voice was ice cold. You're the good cop routine. Win our trust, learn our plans, deliver us to Morrison gift-wrapped. The front door exploded inward. Heavily armed tactical officers poured into the house, shouting commands, filling the small rooms with chaos and violence. Down! Everyone down! James shoved Amara toward the back door, even as Martin raised his hands in surrender. Go! Get out of here! Not without you! Go! He turned to face the officers, placing himself between them and Amara. I won't let you die for my mistakes. But as Amara reached the back door, she found Captain Morrison waiting for her, flanked by 2 officers with assault rifles. His smile was triumphant, cruel. Hello, counselor. Going somewhere? Behind her, she heard James cry out in pain as the tactical team brought him down. She spun around to see him on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, 3 officers kneeling on his back. James! Touching, Morrison said. Romeo and Juliet, cop killer edition. Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to say goodbye in prison, right before you both get what you deserve. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Amara looked into James's battered face and saw her own despair reflected there. They'd been betrayed, abandoned, and cornered. The system had won. The man who'd promised to protect her lay bleeding on Martin Cross's kitchen floor, and she realized with crushing finality that sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes the good guys lost. When everything you believed in crumbles around you, what keeps you fighting? Have you ever faced a moment when giving up seemed like the only option? Share your thoughts on finding strength in the darkest hours. The county jail's holding cell smelled like disinfectant and despair. Amara had been sitting on the concrete bench for 6 hours, staring at the gray walls and trying to process how completely her world had collapsed. Through the small window, she could see protesters gathering outside, some calling for her execution, others demanding justice for police brutality victims. The country was tearing itself apart over her story, and she was powerless to do anything but wait. The cell door clanged open. She expected to see her court-appointed lawyer, a nervous young man who'd already advised her to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Instead, James walked in, his face still bruised from the arrest, his eyes hollow with betrayal and exhaustion. 5 minutes, the guard said, closing the door behind him. That's all they're giving you. James sat beside her on the narrow bench, careful not to touch her. The distance between them felt like an ocean. How are you holding up? His voice was formal, distant. I've been better. Amara studied his profile. James, what happened back there with Martin? Was my fault. He cut her off. I should have seen it coming. Should have known that anyone willing to help us had to have an ulterior motive. That's not fair. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? James finally looked at her, and she saw something that made her heart break all over again. I put you in danger because I wanted to believe in redemption. Wanted to believe that good cops like Martin existed, that the system could be fixed from the inside. You are a good cop. I'm an ex-cop facing murder charges because I chose to trust the wrong person. His laugh was bitter. My lawyer says if I testify against you, claim you seduced me into helping you escape, I might get out in 15 years. The words hit her like ice water. Are you going to? The silence stretched between them for an eternity. Outside, she could hear the protesters chanting, their voices a distant rumble of anger and pain. I don't know, James said finally. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to survive this, get out, and try to build some kind of life from the pieces. And the other part? The other part knows that testifying against you would be the final betrayal. Elena's memory, your trust, everything I've ever claimed to believe in. He turned to face her fully. Amara, they're offering me a deal. Full immunity, clean record, even a recommendation for reinstatement if I play ball. That's actually good news. The words tasted like sawdust in her mouth. You should take it. Should I? Yes, someone needs to survive this. Someone needs to remember what really happened. James stood abruptly, pacing the small cell like a caged animal. You don't understand. If I take their deal, you go down for everything. First-degree murder, conspiracy, assault on police officers. You're looking at life without parole, possibly the death penalty. I know, and you want me to take it anyway. Amara closed her eyes, thinking of her parents, her clients, all the people she'd tried to help over the years. I want you to choose the option that lets you live with yourself. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze directly. James, I've spent my career watching the system destroy good people. I won't let it destroy you too. Not for me. The cell door opened again. The guard stepped in, looking impatient. Time's up. But instead of leaving, James knelt in front of Amara, taking her hands in his. There's a third option. What are you talking about? My lawyer found something, a technicality in the evidence chain. If we can prove Morrison's people tampered with the original footage before making copies, everything they've built falls apart. Hope flickered in Amara's chest, dangerous and fragile. How do we prove that? We don't, but someone else might. James pulled a folded paper from his pocket. Shaw came to see me this morning. Turns out he's been keeping his own records, photographs, witness statements, timeline discrepancies. He wants to testify. Shaw? But he was there when Morrison destroyed the evidence? He was there, and he documented everything. He's willing to come forward, but only if we both refuse the deals and fight this together. James's eyes burned with renewed determination. It's a long shot, could fail completely. We could both end up in prison for life. Or we could win, clear our names, expose Morrison's corruption, get justice for Elena and everyone else they've hurt. He squeezed her hands. But I can't make this choice for you. If you want me to take the deal and walk away, I'll understand. The guard cleared his throat loudly. Seriously, time's up. Amara looked into James's face. This man who'd become her anchor in the storm, who'd shown her what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. She thought of Elena, who'd never gotten the chance to save children's lives. She thought of all the other victims of Morrison's violence who'd been silenced by fear and corruption. If we do this, if we fight, what are our chances? Honestly, maybe 30%. Shaw's testimony could be discredited. Morrison has powerful friends. The jury might not believe a cop killer's version of events. And if we lose everything, but at least we lose fighting. The guard stepped forward, ready to separate them. Amara stood, still holding James's hands, and made her choice. Then we fight. Her voice was steady, certain. We fight for Elena, for every victim Morrison has silenced, for the truth. James smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since the arrest. Together? Together! She kissed him, quick and fierce, before the guard pulled them apart. James? Yeah, when we win. And we're going to win. I want you to ask me something. What? You'll know when the time comes. As they led James away, Amara sat back down on the concrete bench. Outside, the protesters continued their chants, but now she heard something different in their voices. Not just anger, but hope. Not just pain, but the possibility of justice. When faced with impossible odds, what gives you the courage to fight instead of surrender? Sometimes the bravest choice is believing that truth can triumph over power. What do you think makes ordinary people capable of extraordinary courage? For the first time since Maple Street, Amara Williams smiled. She was going to court, and she was going to win. 6 months later, the courthouse steps were packed with reporters, activists, and ordinary citizens who'd followed the trial that had captivated the nation. The case of People versus Williams and Rivera had become more than a legal proceeding. It had become a referendum on justice, corruption, and the possibility that truth could triumph over power. Amara stood at the defendant's table, her hands steady as the jury foreman rose to deliver the verdict. Beside her, James looked every inch the decorated detective he'd once been, his uniform replaced by a crisp suit, but his bearing unchanged. Behind them, the courtroom was packed with supporters, her parents, James's family, civil rights activists, and dozens of other victims of police misconduct who'd found their voices through her case. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Amara Williams, not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Amara's knees nearly buckled with relief, but James caught her, his strong arms holding her steady as cheers and sobs filled the air around them. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant, James Rivera, not guilty. On all remaining charges, the foreman's voice was drowned out by the celebration, but Amara saw his lips form the words that meant freedom. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Judge Patricia Hernandez, a stern woman who'd run her courtroom with military precision, banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! I will have order! When the noise finally subsided, she looked directly at Amara and James. "The defendants are free to go." The courthouse steps felt like a different world. Microphones thrust toward them from every direction, cameras flashed like strobe lights, and reporters shouted questions over each other in a chaotic symphony of vindication. "Ms. Williams, how does it feel to be vindicated?" "Detective Rivera, will you be returning to the force?" "What's next for both of you?" Amara stepped forward to the bank of microphones, James beside her, their hands clasped together. The crowd quieted, sensing that history was about to be made. "6 months ago, I was pulled over for a routine traffic stop that became an attempted execution," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. "2 corrupt police officers tried to murder me because I had the audacity to believe that black women deserve the same justice as everyone else." Behind the reporters, she could see her parents, her father weeping openly, her mother raising her fist in triumph. In the crowd, she spotted faces she recognized from other cases, other battles for justice that had once seemed hopeless. "This verdict isn't just about me and Detective Rivera. It's about Elena Rivera, who died 3 years ago for the crime of being proud of her nursing degree. It's about Tommy Johnson, who was framed by the same officers who tried to kill me. It's about every person who's been told that their word doesn't matter when it's pitted against a badge." The crowd roared its approval. James squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Today, Lieutenant Shaw's courage to speak truth to power has shown that there are good officers who will stand up to corruption. Today, this jury has proven that justice isn't just a word on a courthouse wall, it's a promise we make to each other. A reporter shouted over the crowd, "What about Captain Morrison? Will you be pursuing civil charges?" James stepped forward. "Captain Morrison is facing federal charges for evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and civil rights violations. The FBI has reopened investigations into 47 cases involving officers under his command. Justice for Elena and countless others is finally within reach." "And personally," another reporter called out, "what's next for you two?" Amara and James exchanged a look, the same look they'd shared in that break room 6 months ago when the world was falling apart around them. James reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The crowd went silent, cameras clicking furiously as he dropped to one knee on the courthouse steps. "Amara Williams," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "6 months ago, you asked me to choose between comfort and truth. You showed me what real courage looks like. You taught me that love isn't just about the good times. It's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart." Tears streamed down Amara's face as James opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "You told me I'd know when the time was right to ask you something. Well, counselor," his voice broke with emotion, "will you marry me?" The plaza erupted in cheers before Amara could even answer, but she was already nodding, already pulling him to his feet, already kissing him as flashbulbs popped around them like fireworks. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, Detective Rivera. Always yes." 2 years later, Amara stood in her new office, the law office of Williams and Rivera, civil rights attorneys. Through the window, she could see the courthouse where their lives had been transformed, where justice had finally prevailed over corruption. James entered carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the smile that still made her heart skip. He was no longer Detective Rivera. He'd chosen to leave the force and join her practice, using his experience to help other victims of police misconduct. "The Johnson settlement came through," he said, handing her a cup. $2 million, and the city agreed to mandatory body cameras for all officers. "Elena would have loved that," Amara said softly. "She would have loved you." James wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Sometimes I think she sent you to me, her way of making sure justice finally got served." On Amara's desk sat 2 framed photographs, one of Elena in her graduation cap and gown, and another from their wedding day 6 months earlier. In the wedding photo, they were surrounded by family, friends, and clients whose lives they'd helped rebuild. Lieutenant Shaw, who'd been promoted to captain after Morrison's conviction, stood behind them in his dress uniform. Martin Cross, who testified for the prosecution and received immunity for his cooperation, looked older but somehow lighter, as if telling the truth had lifted a weight from his shoulders. The office door chimed as their first client of the day entered, a young man whose brother had been killed in a suspicious police shooting. His story sounded familiar. Routine traffic stop, officer feared for his safety, no witnesses, case closed. But that was the old way. This was the new way. Amara and James exchanged a look, partners in love, in law, and in the endless fight for justice. They'd learned that the system could be changed, one case at a time, one truth at a time, one victory at a time. "How can we help you?" Amara asked, gesturing for the young man to take a seat. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere, another family was getting the justice they deserved. Somewhere, another corrupt officer was facing consequences for their actions. Somewhere, another victim was learning that their voice mattered. The fight for justice never ended, but neither did the love that sustained it. Love, justice, and courage can triumph over the darkest circumstances. Amara and James found each other in the midst of tragedy and built something beautiful from the ashes. What do you think makes some people capable of turning their worst moments into their greatest victories? Share your thoughts on how love and justice can transform not just individuals, but entire communities.